No scream of shells, no rattle of machine guns, just the faint rustle of wind across mud and wire, and the shallow breathing of men who knew something monstrous was coming. At British headquarters, the staff officers stood tense. Their commander turned to them, with the calm of a man who had already seen hell and measured it. "Gentlemen," he said, "we may not make history tomorrow, but we shall certainly change the geography." 0 hour was 3:10 am beneath the German-held Messines Ridge. 19 colossal mines waited, each one a tomb packed with death. This was not war as the world had known it. This was the Great War's ultimate industrial horror. The very earth turned into a weapon of obliteration. For 2 years the British had prepared in secret. What followed would be remembered not as a battle, but as the moment the ground itself rose up and swallowed 10,000 men in a single, cataclysmic instant. Far below the surface, in a world of perpetual night, worked the Claykickers. These were no ordinary soldiers. They were miners tough, taciturn men from the coalfields of Wales, Yorkshire, Durham, and the distant dominions of Australia, Canada, and New Zealand, hand-picked for their knowledge of rock and clay. They had been formed into special tunnelling companies of the Royal Engineers. Their war was not fought in sunlight or open fields. Their war was fought in the dark, 3 feet wide and 100 feet down. The tunnels were a claustrophobic nightmare. Galleries no wider than a man's shoulders, snaked through the blue clay of Flanders damp, cold, airless. Water seeped constantly from the roof. Candles guttered and died in the foul air. Every breath tasted of wet earth and the sour sweat of fear. The men worked in absolute silence, picks wrapped in cloth, feet bound in sacking so that even their footsteps would not betray them. One scraped aloud, one cough at the wrong moment, and German listeners above would hear it through their stethoscopes and answer with a camouflage, a defensive charge that would collapse the tunnel and bury the diggers alive. Many were crushed, suffocated, forgotten, their bodies sometimes found years later, still clutching picks, faces frozen in the rictus of slow death. The survivors spoke of the terror in whispers, the moment the roof gave way, the sudden roar of earth rushing in, the darkness that swallowed screams. Yet they kept digging, shift after shift, month after month. Some galleries stretched over 1,000 yards, ending directly beneath German strongpoints Hill 60, Spambrook-Cockmalin, the birdcage salient. At the end of each tunnel, they carved out vast chambers. Into those chambers they dragged barrels and bags, 450 tons of ammonal in total, ammonium nitrate mixed with aluminium powder, a dull grey explosive that smelled faintly of almonds and promised annihilation. One mine alone held 95,000 pounds. The Claykickers packed it with the care of undertakers, wiring it back through the long, dripping galleries to surface detonators. Then they waited. 2 years of waiting. 2 years of living like moles while the war above ground should up a generation. This was industrial horror distilled to its purest form. Men reduced to machines, clawing through the earth to plant the seeds of apocalypse. No glory, no flags, just damp, dark, and the constant, knowing knowledge that the next foot of clay might be your grave. Above them, utterly unaware, the Germans waited. On the Messines Ridge the soldiers of the German Fourth Army lived the same grey hell as every other infantryman on the Western Front. Mud, lice, rats the size of cats, the endless drizzle that turned trenches into open sewers. They had held this high ground since 1914 and believed it impregnable. Concrete pillboxes, deep dugouts, interlocking fields of fire. From here they could look down on the British lines and feel, for once, almost safe. They had heard rumours of British mining, of course. Their own tunnellers had counter-mined in places, listening for the distant scrape of picks, blowing camouflages when they could. One British chamber at La Petite Loup farm had been found and destroyed, but the deep mines, the ones driven 80 to 100 feet down into the blue clay, no one suspected those existed. The Germans had no idea that for nearly 2 years enemy hands had been working directly beneath their feet. Imagine the ordinary German soldier on the night of June 6th. He stands in his trench, collar turned up against the chill, sharing a cigarette with his mate. Perhaps he writes a letter home by candlelight in a dugout reinforced with railway sleepers. 20 feet above him, the ridge is solid. 20 feet below him, 450 tons of ammonal lie primed and ready. He feels the earth firm beneath his boots and thinks himself lucky to be on high ground for once. He has no warning, no tremor, no distant rumble. The British tunnellers had been too careful to silent. The Germans slept, or stood sentry, or stared into the darkness beyond the wire, never dreaming that the ground they trusted was a lie. 2 years of painstaking, invisible labour had brought the enemy right under their bellies. The industrial horror was complete. Death not from the sky or the wire, but from the earth itself silent. patient, and utterly merciless. At 3:10 am the world ended. In 19 places along a 9-mile front, charges fired within the space of 20 seconds. The effect was seismic. The ridge heaved upward as if some ancient beast had woken beneath it. Pillars of fire orange, white hot shot hundreds of feet into the black sky. Millions of tons of earth, rock, concrete, steel and human bodies were hurled skyward in a single cataclysmic roar. Witnesses described the ground dancing, rippling like water. Then came the blast wave. 10,000 German soldiers vanished instantly. Some were vaporized in the inferno. Others were flung hundreds of feet through the air only to be buried under falling debris. Entire companies ceased to exist. Trenches that had been there a moment earlier became craters 300 feet across and 100 feet deep. The sound was beyond description, the loudest man-made noise ever heard. It rattled windows in London, 140 miles away. It was mistaken for an earthquake at Lille University. Seismographs in Switzerland recorded the tremor as clearly as a natural quake. The sky rained mud and blood for minutes. Men on both sides who survived spoke of a single, continuous thunder that seemed to split the world in two. British troops waiting in their assembly trenches felt the ground lift beneath them and staggered like drunkards. Some wept, some prayed, most simply stared, mouths open, at the vision of hell rising before them. This was the industrial horror made flesh. The moment technology and patience combined to erase 10,000 lives in the blink of an eye. No bullets, no bayonets, just pure engineered obliteration. When the smoke and dust finally settled, the ridge belonged to the British. The infantry advanced behind a creeping barrage and took their objectives in hours. But the real story was written in the earth. 19 vast craters scarred the landscape, monuments to a new kind of war. Today, one of them is known as the Pool of Peace, Spambrook-Cockmelin, a still, green lake now, ringed by trees and poppies. A simple cross stands at its edge. Visitors walk quietly. They throw coins into the water. Few realize that beneath the calm surface lie the remains of men who were never found, pulverized, entombed, part of the crater wall itself. The psychological wounds ran deeper. Survivors on both sides never recovered. Men spoke of being deaf for days, of the ground still moving beneath their feet in nightmares. Some went mad. Others simply stopped speaking. The explosion did not just change geography. It changed the men who witnessed it. They carried the knowledge that the earth itself could betray them, that safety was an illusion, that the Great War had found a way to kill from below as well as above. The Battle of Messines was called a brilliant success. The ridge was taken. Morale soared. Yet within months, the same ground would drink blood again at Passchendaele. The mines had shown what industrial war could achieve. They had also shown its cost. A landscape forever scarred. A generation forever haunted. And a warning that the horror beneath our feet is never truly buried. The guns fell silent that morning. The ground did not. And the scars remain.